So one of the questions I have is, what are like your signals that you might use to actually, let's say, close the liquidity pool? Because you were saying this thing about, going out of the range that you set up.
Yeah.
So is there any way that you can like of course, you never know, right? But kind of prevent this by closing it earlier,
Yeah.
or is this, and also, is there a possibility in which, let's say, price goes higher, right, on Blur, and then it's out of your range, but even then you end up winning money because you collected a lot of fees before that happened, right?
Yes. Cool. So I answer both questions. The first question is, okay, let's say I have a pull up. I'm like killing on and collecting it. When should I close it? It's a great question. I think there's a couple of factors that you want to look into. One is how much in fees are you collecting over the past 5 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours, 24 hours? And this is important because, like, I could tell you all this stuff about looking into like how much trading's happened and stuff, but like you'll get a feel for how much you're generating. And it's like, by day 10, if you're only generating like $60 a day on this $6,000 liquidity pool, it's like 1% a day. It's kind of like, well, it's not worth it for me to risk all this liquidity just to earn 1% on a day, right? And so typically speaking with
Right.
these things, like after I'd say even the first couple of days, like this particular one, I'm probably gonna close within the next 10 to 15 hours, depending on how things go. Just to see how it goes. But basically, like as demand decreases, it's just not worth it to risk all your liquidity at that point. And so you should keep an eye on it, check. I don't know. I personally check every couple of hours just to see how it's doing. And once it's slowed down a certain amount, like I'm willing to close it. Another is if you see or know that a price move is coming your way. So like, if there's a big announcement, if you see like, a big price hammering in either direction, like that's gonna matter too. Because what happens with a big price movement is like, okay, like it could be that Blur is worth a lot more, which is great. Like your overall assets went up here, but you would have been better off just holding that Blur and then selling it for ETH altogether, rather than letting the liquidity pool do it for you. So big price movements are not a good thing for you when you're doing liquidity setups. And so like if you guys look at the Blur chart now, it's like it's been pretty steady around like zero point 0.6 to 0.65, but like you want to be really careful about big price movements. So wanted to call that out. Um, yeah. I think Relic wants to say something, but he has a kid with him, so I'll kind of mention it. He says, easy analogy, your liquidity you want to add is a set amount of water, and the bounds are the size of a cup. The smaller the cup, your layer of water is thick, and you can compete for more fees in a given spot. The bigger cup and your layer of water is thinner. Yeah, so that's, kind of the pool analogy, basically like, you only have so much liquidity you're putting in. The more you concentrate it in the middle, the more you're going to just like jack up fees, but also you run the risk of like a small price movement at that point, like just absolutely kills you because like all your assets will move to ETH, all your assets move to Blur while the price is going up. So that's kind of the trade-off. And then when I didn't quite catch your second question, if you could repeat that.
Yes, let me try to to remember. No, but yeah, it was like you say, if I'm doing this right, and then the price, let's say, goes higher for Blur, and you are out of your range, right?
Yes.
You say that you will end up being in a worse place than just holding and then selling, right?
Yes.
But it's that true always, or if you manage to get a lot of fees, then maybe that risk is outweighed in that
You're
regard.
correct. The answer is not always, but from my estimation of most things, like a large price movement, either because you have a really tight range or because there was a really large price movement, most people do not have their pools up long enough to make up for that difference. Like, I just claimed 10% in fees
Right.
here. Great. If Blur moves up to $1, then, you know, I probably lost like, I don't know, 40% in like a potential upside that I could have had just holding Blur. It's just going to be really hard to make up for it in almost any scenario. But there are scenarios where like hey, like, let's say Blur stays at 65 cents for like 7 days. It's like hotly traded shit for the entirety of that time. You make a killing on fees, then you kind of don't care, right? Like you've made most back at that point.
Right. Perfect.
Cool.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Yeah, I know Bleft had a question, maybe Rollers.
Yep. So basically, like, you just really want to make sure it doesn't go out of the range you set, right? And then, is there any rule of thumb basically on like where to set your range, or is every token different?
Yeah, so to answer your first statement, there are reasons for you to be okay with going out of range. If my stance was like, look, like I kind of want to take profits on Blur while it's going up anyway, and if the liquidity pool ends up being the way I do it, basically as Blur price goes up, I keep selling Blur for ETH. I could have gotten a lot more if I had just held on to my Blur and sold it for ETH, but I didn't want to be as degenerate. Like it's not the end of the world, right? You're still making a nice profit because it's going up. So I almost view that as like if you're okay with that, like what you're basically doing is taking profits on the way up. When that happens, that's okay. Right? That's not the end of the world if it goes out of the range, if that's what you're trying to do. The flip side of that, if you're going out of range because price on your assets are going down, that's where you get killed. So, if Blur doesn't go up and it's like I go out of range because Blur drops to like 30 cents, then I've just bought into Blur on the way down with my ETH, and that's not a good place to be. So that's the first thing. The general rule for setting a price, it's so hard to say, right? Like this, we had no idea what price this token would be at coming in. We had no idea that it would be trading at a nice range. Those of you who've been here for a long time, who've done like SOS, I think was one of the big drops. There were a couple of Looks, obviously, another big one. Like those prices can like fluctuate quite a bit. So I wish I could give something not financial advice there around that, but it just really depends. You kind of have to play around a little bit. To give you a better idea, like I wanted to see where price would settle a little bit first before I did anything. And so, Blur opened at 5. I was like, okay, like that's gonna drop. You saw it quickly drop to like I think 48 cents. And now it's like at least a little bit stable around like 60, 65 cent range. That makes me a little more comfortable with some of the ranges I'm thinking about, like 50 cents versus $1. That's just a wild guess on my end, but now I know that stabilized range, at least for today, or at least the last like 2 hours, is kind of around there. So that gives me, experience slash some data point stability around like I'm comfortable with what happens if it's 50 or $1. There's also a risk tolerance piece with setting your ranges. Like if you want to go balls to the wall and go, I'm going to set my range between 60 and 70 cents and hope to make a freaking killing on this because I'm like super leveraged to the tits. But also, I'm okay if like it falls out of 60 or 70 cents. You can do something like that. That's super risky and super leverage, but like everybody has a different risk tolerance for like how much leverage you want to put in to get as many fees as possible while risking it falling out of your range. I don't know.
Gotcha. Yeah, that helps a lot. Can you edit your range?
So you cannot edit your range. You can always close a pool and reopen a pool, or open a pool with the rest of your money.
Cool. And then last question. Like this LP pool, right? It's on Uniswap. Is there any other like pools that offer more like fees or that are better or worse?
So this is actually going to be your best bet for 2 reasons. There are plenty of other pools. Uniswap V3 in particular has 3 things going for it. Number one, it's where a lot of people go for trades. And so from just a pure demand perspective, remember, the more trades that happen, the more you're printing fees. That's where you want to be. So Uniswap's usually the way to go. Number two, because Blur is not like, I don't know what the exact phrase is, but there's like a certain difference in how much you get back in fees. Blur is like, I guess, a riskier token, so they offer you 1%. Usually on other pools, and especially Uniswap V2, it only offers 0.3%. So think about it as like you know, like whatever that 1% is distributed among all the people in the pool, like that's a lot better than 0.3%, obviously. So Uniswap v3 offers that 1% and is almost universally for these newer tokens like the way to go for that. And then number 3, the whole leverage thing I was talking about with setting your ranges, you can only do that on v3. On other like v2 and different pools, generally speaking, what happens is they set the range for you, which is everything. And so your liquidity is super diluted. It's just 1x, no leverage, no anything. You can't set the range. It's just covering the entire range. You don't get to control what the range gets to be, which means you don't get to put your liquidity where you think you're going to earn the most money. And so V3 gives you that option. It was actually a huge development in just the overall like DeFi crypto space to have V3. So those are your 3 advantages with V3. I wouldn't say it's the best case in every single case, but like, you know, for what we're doing, for all the things we've looked at for like Blur, SOS, Looks, whatever it is, V3 is probably the way you want to go.
Cool. Thank you for that, Deathstrike.
Yeah. Brawlers, we will get to your out of range thing in a bit, but want to just field questions. Don't hesitate, guys, if you have questions about like, you know, how do I even set this up? How much should I put in? What are some of the trade-offs? Happy to just kind of like keep reiterating. I think our main goal here is to educate people and make sure they don't get screwed in setting these up. And this can be kind of scary when you first look at it. So, you know, don't hesitate to ask questions here, or even if you're not comfortable here, just DM me or like Relic or something. We'll be happy to help you out.
Blur go up plus I out of range.
Cool. So we can talk about starting out of range. That's what you wanted to talk about, right, Brawlers?
I mean, I guess that's what it's called, one-sided liquidity.
Yeah, so you can start like this, right?
Got it.
Yeah, so what Brawlers is talking about is something that's a little bit more advanced. You can start a pool with it not collecting any liquidity. And what this is basically saying here is, I want to start a pool, but only when Blur reaches at least 50 cents or less. Or I guess this is usually an easier way to put it. Like, yeah, so like this range here is basically saying, I don't want to start participating in a pool until Blur is at least $1. And a reason you might want to do this is you're like, yo, I think this thing's going up. If I put any money in now for being in range, it's just gonna sell my Blur off for ETH. And if I think this is going to $1, why should I set a liquidity pool? At the same time, I think if I am, you know, making a speculation on price and I think like, hey, I think this is gonna fall within like $1, $1.50 the next day, I want to capture the upside when it does trade in that range, but I don't want to suffer any impermanent loss now. I can set my range out of range. And so all you're doing here is you're basically saying, hey, this is the range at which I want to play. This is between like $1 to like $2.50, I think is the math on Blur. And once it falls into that range, you start collecting fees. And so one of the things to note about what we talked about earlier is like, you can fall out and back in range again. Like I've had tokens before where, you know, I set it to like, I don't know, like $3. It goes up to 4, it's out of my range. I'm now no longer collecting fees because I'm not providing liquidity in that range. But then eventually the token comes back down under $3 and I start collecting liquidity again. That's something that can happen. This is just a version of that where it's like, okay, I'm just gonna start outside of the range because that's the range I want to play in. You know, the trade-off obviously is like you're just kind of, your liquidity is kind of just sitting there, not doing anything. But hey, if you were gonna hold on to Blur anyway until it reaches $1 and not sell till then, this is not a bad way to just hold your liquidity. Might as well let it do something if and when it does reach that price. So yeah, that's the simplest explanation for how some of that works. Brawlers, I'm happy to field any questions about why you would do that or when you would do that and things like that.
I understand. I see what. I was more curious of how it's like actually set up now. It's just you set it up out of range.
Yeah. I think the most confusing thing here is like what we refer to here as min price and max price is actually the flip of what you're thinking. Like min price is Blur at its highest dollar amount, and max price is Blur at its lowest amount. That's the piece that usually trips people up. The easiest way for me to anchor to this, like, let's say I just think of ETH as 1500. I mean, I think it's a little bit higher than that right now. I just think of ETH as 1500, and then 1500 per ETH.
I realize I have my sandwich.
Gonna mute Seinfeld there. 1500 blur per ETH is just $1 blur. That's the easiest way for me to think about it, and then I just kind of anchor everything else to that. Just to do some quick math.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I went through things pretty quickly there, so happy to talk more field questions again about something that was confusing about what I said earlier. If anybody wants a deeper conversation about impermanent loss and stuff like that, like we can walk into that as well. But yeah, happy to work through things. Questions?
Hey, Deathstrike, I had one about volume. Like you mentioned, what did you say? You'll probably keep yours open for 10 or 15 hours. But
Yeah.
is there a way to see in Uniswap? Like I can look at CoinGecko and see the marketplace volume, but like how do we see volume in Uniswap and kind of gauge, like whether it's worth it to still keep the pool open or if there aren't that many trades happening?
Yeah, good question. I know there's a way to see that. I actually
I-
don't have a link off the top of my head.
Yeah, I know there's a way to.
Yeah, there's a specific link that talks through that. So in the past, just for full transparency, like I tried to math it out doing that, but what ends up happening is like my visual, like what checking in 3 hours and seeing what happens from a trading volume perspective, I almost always act faster off of that than trying to go through the ground data. So that's part of it. And then also like if you think there's going to be an event that causes more trading, more FOMO trading, then that obviously would have an impact too. So those are just some things to consider with dealing with stuff like this. But yeah,
I found it.
okay. If you could link that or post it somewhere, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll put it in.
I am actually
Yeah,
here.
because I was curious to see, and maybe this is Brawler's link shows it, like just how big the pool is. Because like for example, I've noticed, like you said, I was in, fairly soon after Relic got in the pool. The fees in that first hour were crazy, and now it's pretty much like nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it nothing. It's just like a more normal fee, even though
Yeah.
a lot of trading. It's just like you can imagine how much rush to trade there was in the first like hour. That's what happens with any like newly listed token. So
And it's usually on Dex Screener, Dex Tools, the amount of liquidity that's in a pool.
yeah, I think I'm gonna set up something like this here. Wait, this is what I have. Cool. So I'll just show you guys an example. Like, what is this? This is like 50 cents to maybe like $1. This up.
Yeah, this is cool. Thank you, Brawlers.
You're welcome.
Cool. Oh, one thing to note, when you're setting up a pool, you're not doing any sort of DEX trading, so you don't have to worry about getting sandwiched or having to run it on Eden like you guys should all be doing if you're trading. So just want to call that out from a ranging perspective. Yeah. So new pool is up. This one's obviously going to be slower than the other one in terms of like getting money in there, but yeah, it's kind of it'll just run when it runs.
Yeah, so this is interesting. From looking at what Brawler shared, there's already been $720,000 in fees. Is that just across all of Blur ETH trading on Uniswap, and then 72 million in volume?
I think so. I don't know the exact numbers, but
I'm just looking at the chart that he posted. That's just the Blur ETH 1% pool.
Yeah.
On Uniswap, which I mean that's pretty good. Like if you look at CoinGecko, I mean I think the top centralized marketplace isn't much more than that.
Yeah.
75 million.
Yeah,
80 million.
There's probably some V2 as well, and wherever else like Sushi or wherever else you could trade it. Yeah.
Well, and I guess, I mean, this is also really useful to see, just to see the total value locked. So that's your percentage of the pool then. Like it's showing here that it's 9.4 million.
Okay, yeah. So that's whatever small amount I am of the pool. Yeah, you got to imagine there are some whales who put in like 100 ETH type investments in that, so wouldn't be surprised.
Yo, what's going on, fellas?
Hey, just talking through pools.
Literally what I came here for.
Nice.
All right, so where do I get started, man? Obviously I have the airdrop from Blur.
So you
Would
need
you
to have
say- Yeah, go ahead.
you need to have some ETH because you need something to as a counterpart to trade with.
Okay, and that ETH would have to match whatever I'm putting in the pool. Is that correct?
Match is a relative term here. Like you'll need different amounts depending on what kind of pool like limits you'll set up. But yeah, match is close enough.
Okay, bear with me. I'm looking up my airdrop real quick.
Cool.
All right, so I got 10K Blur,
Mhm.
around like 10K Blur, which is like 6K USD.
Yeah.
So for that amount, how much would I relatively need in order to set up the pool?
Depends on how you set up your range, but I'd say typically for 10K Blur, I don't know, anywhere from like 2 to 4 ETH max should be pretty good. Probably even a little less than that.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, basically the wider coverage you're trying to do, you'll have to put more ETH in because your ETH has to help with coverage. Versus if you keep a tighter pool, you can keep that relatively low. But tighter pool means you can fall out of range pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it my initial pool. I'm trying to keep it more short term. So I guess the range would be tighter, but more focused on the ranges that we have right now. And then depending on the return, I'd obviously increase the range of it.
Yeah, if you're comfortable, you can share your screen and I can walk you through it. But no pressure.
No, absolutely. Let me get my things ready. Give me 1 second.
Cool. Yeah, we'll just continue to do examples for people popping in and out.
Hey, Deathstrike. Well, while he's getting that set up, let's say you wanted to have. I mean, I'm pretty low liquid and wanted to have like 1 ETH.
Yeah.
In there. I mean, is that even just to kind of play around with it? I mean, is that even worth it? Do you think, or kind of how does that work?
Yeah, so I think at 1 ETH you need to start being a little careful. The two considerations you have are you're going to get hit on gas on both sides to start the pool and to close the pool. So I think gas has chilled a lot, right? But like at some point earlier when gas was like 400, it was like 0.2 ETH to like start a pool. So you're already starting like 20% in the hole kind of thing. So that's like pretty aggressive. It's come down now. I think you're probably only looking at like 0.04, 0.05, but you're going to get charged that twice, once to open and once to close. So things to consider. Number one, if you're going to set this pool up really quickly and close it in the next like couple of hours, you're probably not going to claim that many fees. Probably not worth it for you. Number two, if you're kind of low liquid and you don't want to like spend the 0.1 upfront, because like once you've set up the pool, you're basically committed to like unset it up and take all your money back. All right, are you willing to commit 0.1? Do you think you can like make that back? That's like what 10% of what you're thinking about putting in. So like that's already like quite an investment. So I would think about that. And you bring up a good point, which is like you're always free to set up and close as many pools and as many ranges as you want, but you just want to be a little bit careful because like the more you're setting and closing, you're just eating a lot of transaction fees, especially at times of high gas. High gas is great because it means a lot of people are probably trading Blur, which is great, but also you're going to get hurt on that. So yeah, 1 ETH is right around the like, maybe think twice about the transaction fee and see if you want to do it.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you'll notice I have like, I don't know, this is the equivalent of like 4 ETH-ish. And for me, even I had like, I think this is worth it, but like thinking about the transaction cost, like even 0.2 on like 4 ETH, that's like 5% right there, right? So that's already quite a bit.
And then when you're setting up the ranges, it gave you like said how much you needed to put in there. Is that what you have to put in, or is that
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
How pools work is it has to have a like equivalent amount of blur and ETH in this case, because like in order to provide liquidity, it has to be both assets are part of the pool and can't just be going towards one asset or the other. Otherwise, there's no pool, right? Like if it's just ETH, it's not really a pool. And so how an automated market maker works for something like this is it will automatically sell or buy your blur and ETH within the pool to move one or another. So the price it's quoting you is the amount you have to put in for both to be at the same ratio that the current pool is at. So you don't have a choice over that.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Cool. Yeah, so one thing to call out here, you'll notice like I think I started with the liquidity here being worth around like 64.50-ish. What has happened is ETH has climbed relative to Blur. And so essentially like, I've been getting more Blur and selling ETH because ETH has been climbing relative to Blur. That's why you see the 74-26% distribution here. So there's some impermanent loss there because I would have been better off just holding ETH at that point. But the trade-off for the $150 of permanent loss I've had is like I've made $676 in fees. Been well worth it, even if it continues to fall out of range a little bit here. So those are some of the considerations when it comes to that. Like basically the range is not shifted too much. So whatever impermanent loss in either direction I'm losing or gaining, the fees have more than made up for it.
All right. So Deathstrike, I am trying to. Okay, so my plan is to use everything that I got airdropped in order to set up the entire liquidity pool.
Okay.
So sharing my screen right now.
Yep.
Would this be too little in order to create a pool for, let's say, the week?
No, you can see it immediately. So go hit pool on the top middle right there, next to swap token NFTs. Yeah. Plus new position. And then select your token, select blur as your second token. And what we've talked about before is you want to do ETH blur because that's where most of the trading is going to be. You're collecting fees on trading, so you want to be there, if that makes sense. Okay, yeah. So
okay, back to the point. I would have to trade. I would have to swap my half of the whatever I have in blur in order to cover the ETH part on blur. I mean, like for the swap.
If
Do you follow what I'm saying?
If you just hit max on blur, it'll tell you how much ETH you need. Cool. So right now it's saying if you want to cover this wide of a range, you need to put four ETH in. But this is saying I want to cover a range all the way up to like blur being 33 cents. So you can move that top range down a little bit. No, not that one. The other one. Yep. Move it down to like 3,000 blur per ETH. That's like 50 cents. Move it up a little bit. This is quite aggressive. So like, did you see how the amount of ETH you needed went way down? That's because you're now not trying to cover an entire ocean with your liquidity. You're trying to cover a smaller amount. But this is also saying I don't think blur drops below 50 cents. Otherwise, I go out of range. I don't know if any of that made sense.
Speaking a little Chinese to me, but it's starting to make a little. I get that, like, as I decrease the range, you're trading within that threshold. But what I don't get is like how can you tell the token price as you set the thresholds?
How can you?
Is it because is it because it's by ETH price?
Yeah. So the easiest way I can think of it is if ETH is 1,500, then 1,500 blur is $1 ETH. Does that make sense? And then 3,000 blur is 50 cents ETH. Like 50 cents blur into ETH.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just a simple anchoring point for me. So yeah, like that's not an unreasonable range, right? If you set 1,500 blur per ETH at your min price and 3,000 at your max price, what you're saying is, I think I would like to create a liquidity pool where blur trades between 50 cents and $1. And if it falls out of that, so be it. But if it doesn't, great.
Okay, so to set up for this, I would basically need whatever this is showing right here, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So then I gotta go swap some tokens.
Yeah, you probably need more than 0.4 ETH is what you're looking at. Yeah, and for those of you listening here, just to call out, like, like people get really excited about the first like hour and a half, and then they're like, "What the fuck?" Afterwards, like, understand that the time frame's a little longer than that. Like, I've had ones where I just leave it for 24 hours, and it's like you come back, and it's like, "Oh shit, I made like 10-15%." Like 10-15% over the course of a day without doing anything is fucking killing it. So I know we're used to like 3x, 10x, whatever in this space, but like liquidity pools are just a way to kind of like apply your liquidity and just let it run. So don't be disappointed if it doesn't go 2x within the course of like the next hour. These things are going to take a little bit of time, but it's not too crazy from a risk perspective.
And then even when we're using Uniswap, we have to have the Eden RPC on, right?
So this is really important for everyone. If you are swapping tokens in any form, I would highly suggest, almost like financial advice here, like make sure you're running Eden or make sure you're running an RPC, because what happens is the higher your slippage, the more that somebody can come in and just like own you on a sell buy and take a chunk of your profits out. You don't ever want that to happen. I'm gonna get really upset if that happens to any of you, because we've been just pushing this for days, weeks, and months. Make sure you are on an RPC like Eden if you are swapping between tokens. Pooling doesn't matter, because pooling, you're not actually swapping tokens. You're just putting money in a pool. So that you can do on ETH network. Doesn't matter.
Also,
There's slippage when you add into a pool though. Just keep that in mind. So I would still use it there.
That's true. Yeah.
question: should I be having an RPC on for a different location outside of the US?
Should you have it? I don't think that should matter.
No.
They're not related, right?
No, it's just based on speed at that point. That's really it. But once you're in the Flashbot mempool, it doesn't really matter.
Okay. So 1.15 should be enough to cover in terms of that, in terms of setting up the liquidity pool for what we originally had. So hold up, my dumbass was on push to talk. Approval, signature request.
It like lags behind a bit. Sometimes you just have to chill and refresh and whatnot. It's pretty annoying actually.
Did I have to set up, like, change my slippage, or I'm good as it is right now?
I had it at 10% when I did my, but I don't know what yours is at. It might fail if you don't have it at 10.
0.5 is going to be a little. You're probably okay at even like 2, 3, 4% right now, just because it's not wildly fluctuating.
Yeah, it looks like it didn't go through.
Yeah,
Yeah,
0.5.
you gotta try like 5 or 7.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you are going to try 5 to 7, I would suggest you switch to Eden.
Yes.
I am on
100%.
Eden right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not. Are you on Eden right?
Yeah.
It's not you on Eden right. Oh, it is. Okay, never mind. Good.
Let's go with 5. Do I have to change any of these other things or no?
No, you're good. Just give it a bit too, because what I noticed from Eden is that like it doesn't actually like show you anything until way later. So give it like a couple minutes.
Is Eden the RPC you're using?
Yeah.
Is that do you have to pay for the RPC?
No, RPC is free. It's in a VC link.
And is it better than just using Ethereum mainnet?
Yeah, it protects you from sandwich attacks. If you have a second, go through the thread I just dropped on the MVHQ page. It breaks down like sandwich attacks, how to protect yourself, and it has the information for both of Eden's free RPCs.
Awesome, bro. What channel is that in?
It's on our Twitter, but I think
Oh,
I
it's on the
dropped
Twitter.
it.
Got it. Got it.
Mhm. Here, I'll drop it for you. Give me a second.
Yeah, just remember this is mostly only for trading tokens. It's kind of slow for trading NFTs. It's not beneficial. It's
Yes.
mostly just for trading tokens, so you don't get sandwiched and lose money.
Yeah, exactly. This
All right.
So real quick to double check, Deathstrike, because I'm going to repool my rewards. You said when we're adding and removing liquidity, we don't need to be on Eden. There's no risk of sandwich.
I have never experienced any issues there. If you want to be safe, sure, that should work fine. But I've found there's a speed trade-off when it comes to doing these things when it's volatile. So I usually don't, but yeah, up to you there. It really shouldn't be that much of an issue, especially if you're not popping massive slippage.
Thank you, Poppy.
Gotcha.
I have a question as well. So, is this auto compounding or not? The rewards you earn.
It is not.
Okay.
In order to collect your fees, you have to collect your fees.
Am I
Yeah.
good to close this real quick?
Yeah, that thing doesn't matter. It's just a notification.
Did you guys go over which ranges you're doing by chance, or is it like just personal preference, or do you have like a recommended range, like the one it gives you?
Yeah, so NFA obviously, I like to play a little bit tighter with my ranges, and I showed everybody. But like for example, I was thinking about like, hey, like if I think the range will train around like 50 cents to $1, that might be a range that I would look at. But again, like you just don't know, right? Like you can be really aggressive and do like 55 to 70 cents if you're okay with it falling out of range at either side. You can do it a little wider than that. I know the base was talking about like I think it was like 30 cents blur. Like you can probably get a little tighter than what Uniswap is showing you.
Question though, how do you actually? So I see the price in ETH, but like, how do you convert that to like regular old? This is
Right. The easiest way I think about it is if ETH is 1500, then 1500 blur to ETH is $1, and
Gotcha.
3000 blur to ETH is 50 cents, and that I just work from there, just as the easy, math point.
cool. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the part that usually gets everyone, right? Because it's like, oh man, I have to like convert to USD and then convert back to ETH. Like this is so fucking annoying. But yeah, just peg to an ETH number and figure out from there. That 1500, 3000, not an unreasonable range. I know some people in here who got super aggressive and did like 1800 to 2400. That's fine. That's your own risk tolerance. That's just leverage. I know some people who did much wider. Right, like I think. I saw some first pools that were like more 1,000 to 7,000 type thing. You'll get fewer fees, but you won't risk all your liquidity falling on one side or the other. So yeah.
And once again, the risk is just your thing changes from half and halves to only in or ether blur. That's actual risk, correct?
Yeah, the actual risk is the opportunity cost. Like if you would have been better off just holding the asset because it mooned, or like holding the other asset because the opposite asset just tanked. Like you could lose a lot of upside downside there, but just being within range, especially via wide range, it's just gonna shift between the two assets, which is fine.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
And you said it's common for it to take usually this long for the swap, right?
So in particular, because you're using Eden, it might take a little while.
Okay.
Yeah, Eden just looks at a lot fewer blocks, so it just takes time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure today doesn't help either.
And there's no way to like change your range once you set up. You have to like close it and redo it, correct?
Yes, you have to close it and reopen it, and that there's gas fees involved with that, obviously.
Yep, all those high gas fees right now. Thank you.
Hey, I have a question.
What's up?
Do you know that platform that everyone's using to kind of see, what like who's the most farmed, in the Blur airdrop, or you're able to kind of see liquidity pools and stuff too, and like what they're actually making money on and whatnot. It's kind of like a dark themed platform. I don't really know what it is though. There's a couple tweets that I've been coming out with it. I posted the link of a tweet in the voice chat channel. I don't know if anyone knows it.
Try to see what you posted
Yeah, I just posted it again.
from Connor, the tweet.
Yeah.
Cool. This is my first time seeing this, just to know.
Yeah, there's a few Metaverse HQ members that were they're posting their liquidity pools with this platform too. So I'm just kind of seeing what it was because it's really nice because you can choose like where you're making your fees on too. So
Yes. I've seen screenshots of this before. I personally don't know where this is from, so. I hope someone else knows, because I don't.
Are there other RPCs that you recommend for faster transactions, or is that just something that we all got to deal with?
This is probably the easiest for I don't know what a normal person in crypto is, but let's call it a normal person in crypto. To set up Eden, because there's things like flashbots and stuff, but then you have to find certain nodes. I'm not going to go into it. This is just
non-crypto natives.
that Kenny?
Right, like stuff like this is just easier.
People with jobs and families.
What's that? I just sit here in front of a computer all day and stare at my liquidity pool.
Guys, I'm not a NEET. I'm a crypto native.
Yeah, since you've started going over this Deathstrike, over 1.5 million's been added to the pool.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. This is typically what happens. You want to get in early. It's fine though. I mean, what's it been like 20 minutes? I've put in this second pool here. Up 0.4%. Let's go.
We love percentages, bro.
Yes.
I figured out what the platform was. It's called Arkham Intelligence.
Arkham, like the Batman games? It is. Oh, this one's good. I like the theme. Platform. You need to sign up for it, looks like. And join a waitlist.
Yeah.
Oof.
It's freaking sick though.
Yeah, I really like the vibe. Anyway, I'll just hang tight here. If anybody has additional questions, feel free to DM or message in here if any of you are sending in polls. Otherwise, we'll I think we're pretty good to go.
Yeah, the one other I was going to ask, since you do this so regularly, is this like a big part of your trading strategy, or do you just wait until there's good pool opportunities like Blur?
I'd say in some of the crazy bull run times, this was certainly like it's just a tool in your toolkit, right? Like I want to be able to play where if I think an asset's going to go up, then obviously I'll just trade, and there's all sorts of leverage and positions you can take. Same thing if an asset's going down, right? This is more of a way where okay, like if I think that an asset's going to stay at a certain price range or like kind of hover for a bit, it's a good way for me to make my money work for me. I'm just lending it out for interest. And it's, there's all sorts of way to lend your money out, like staking ETH and stuff that, as we found out in the last year and a half, had some pretty terrifying consequences with you losing your entire asset, which is not good. But pools are a way to kind of like a little bit more risk, lend out your money, but also take some price impact as needed. And that's okay, because that's just a way to kind of do that. So big part of my not these days, but maybe certainly during the launch of certain assets over the last year and a half in NFTs, it was a great way to make, you can make quite a killing the first like weekend on some of these assets, as long as you have in mind an exit point. These days a little less so, but again, just a tool in the toolkit, if you will.
So, like today, you can't really just set it and forget it, right? You gotta be on this. Like you gotta really monitor it. So, like if it's going out of your range, that you get out.
It
Right?
depends, right? Like if you set a super aggressive range and you set it up that you were not comfortable with, then maybe you want to be on it, right? A good example of like setting and forgetting is like you set a super wide range. If it fluctuates a little bit, whatever. I'm just gonna let it run for 24 hours. I'm not gonna make any, knee-jerk decisions about it. Just chilling here, happy to collect my like couple of percent, and I'll check tomorrow to see if I want to close it. There's really a way to play that where you're not super concentrated. You set a range like, 800 blur to like 7,000 blur. It's probably okay. Any price movement's not going to affect you that much. You're chilling. If you are super keen on redoing your pool because the price has changed, or like you want to get it tighter, or you're feeling greedy and you kind of want to like set a really leveraged tight range, like that's where you end up having to monitor more. So that's kind of a choice for yourself, if you will.
Cool. And can you claim your fees as you go, or do you have to leave them and claim when you close the pool?
Good question. I think closing your pool automatically claims your fees, but I believe you can claim your fees separately, but I almost always close my pools when I claim. One, from a gas efficiency perspective, and then two, just like there's a good chance I want to just restart a new pool and like redo it with my fees into the new pool, if that makes sense. Just to, like,
So you're farming more?
yeah. You can claim
Gotcha.
yeah, so you can claim separately. There's obviously gas transaction costs choice there. Just always keep that in mind.
Cool.
One more question, if I may. You mentioned leverage a couple of times. What is that about? Like when you put a smaller range, you are automatically like leveraging, or that was
Yeah.
just,
So
keyword you
what you're
used?
saying when you put a smaller range is I only want to be a part of this part of the pool, and only when transactions are being done in this particular portion of this range do I want my liquidity to be provided. And so the best way is what Relic described it as, which is like if I want to cover the entire ocean, and at any time something drops into the ocean, I get like a little part of that. That's great. If I want to only be focused in this particular little river, and all of my money is set in this river, I won't capture anything that falls into the ocean, but like anything that falls into this river, man, like I'm a big portion of that river. that's the trade-off you're making when you're doing small ranges versus large ranges. So, it like a good comparison is like it's actually leverage. It's what you're saying is I want to leverage all my liquidity so that only when Blur token is within like a 50 to like 75 cent piece, I'm getting liquidity fees. But holy hell, like all my liquidity is concentrated on that. Versus actually I want to put it across like 25 cents to like $1.25. I'll cover anything in that range, but now not all of my liquidity is being applied to a more concentrated like trading range. So less of my liquidity is being used when the liquidity pool takes on a transaction, and so you're earning less. And so that's the trade-off. But that's what.
Right. So the risk is that you're losing more opportunity because it only hits for that small portion.
Yeah, the risk is because you're so leveraged, like large price movements will generally hurt you because now it's like if my range is so tight, then a 10-cent move in this range means all of my Blur became ETH or all of my ETH became Blur versus like my range was like 5 times as wide as this. A 10-cent move is like nothing. Like, okay, my assets move from 50-50 to like 48-52. It's totally fine. I don't know if that made any sense. I can clarify more.
Right. But what is the risk if let's say that movement happened and now I only have Blur, right? If I still think that Blur is not going to tank, right?
Yes.
Then it's not that bad, right? Or
am
I losing, right?
Yeah. The trade-off is like I would have been better off just keeping my money in ETH rather than trading into Blur, selling Blur as it went lower, right? Like you did lose opportunity cost there. But if you're like, hey, you know what? Blur might dip, but I'm pretty confident it'll come back up. I don't care. Then that's fine.
Right. If you're not using that liquidity anyway, right? For
Yes.
example,
Yeah. It's just opportunity cost, basically. Like,
right.
I just wouldn't anchor to zero. Or your base asset. It's just like, okay, like I could have made more if I held, but if I'm okay with the fluctuations, knowing that it's going to come back anyway, I'm just providing liquidity because I was going to hold anyway. Great.
Right. Thank
you. Poppy, did you get your thing up? Is it stuck on pending?
Yeah, it's stuck on pending right now.
Interesting. You can always speed it up or cancel trick and redo it again. That's weird. I don't guess it's not that crazy right now, is it? I don't know what happened to you. Gas like 65 right now. Weird.
Can you see the Ether transaction right now, or no? Are you still on the Uniswap page?
No, I can see your Etherscan transaction.
Yeah, I mean, nothing's popping up here.
Did you just get stuck in the mempool?
Did I just get rugged?
It's
what RPC are you using?
Just Eden.
Eden, yeah.
Should be fine.
Do you need to use Eden to set up the pool?
I personally don't think there's going to be too much risk there, but someone else here did mention that you might want to do it just to be safe. So up to you. I think an important trade-off to note is like, because liquidity pools, the price is also fluctuating, especially when the price is fluctuating a lot. I try not to use Eden there because Eden's going to be so slow that like it will not catch you in time. But you got it.
We're in business. We are in business.
Let's go.
So I personally don't, but if you want to play it straight, you can.
Okay, so we go to pool.
Yep.
Go to new position.
Yep. Select Blur.
Good old Blur. Do I edit the fee tier?
Just the 1%.
0.1%.
No, the full 1%. This is considered an exotic pair. It should have defaulted to that. That's weird. Yeah. So right now, what it's saying is Blur could be yeah. I think
you said a good range is 3K, right?
I did not give that financial advice, but that is
not financial advice for. Oh my God, there's so many people here.
All you're saying for 3K is that that's Blur at 50 cents.
That's Blur at 50 cents. Okay.
Yeah, that's if you fall.
What's Blur at right now? Let's see.
Blur is right now, I think, 62 cents.
64, yeah.
Yeah.
64? Nice. Okay, so this would be the lower end of my pool, correct?
Mhm.
And this would be the higher end?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what is the higher end right now?
Your higher end is like $1.20-ish right now. $1.25.
Okay. Okay, we like that. Gonna max this.
Sorry, everybody, I just jumped in. What site is that you were looking at?
The pool setup one was on Uniswap.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Cool. And Johnny, I'm happy to walk you through the entire process if you would like.
I know I just jumped in, so I'm a little late. I'm trying to catch up.
No, you're good. I think we're just gonna keep this up and help people walk through examples. This might be helpful for anyone else trying to think about their pools. So yeah, I'm happy to walk you through a full pool setup if you want.
Yeah, give me 1 sec. I got to get things
All right,
transferred
so-
into a wallet.
All right, so we've stayed in that range. Yeah, I think that's good. Do I have to change any of these numbers, or this is just basically telling me like my range, like my minimum price and my max price?
It's just if you want to make the range tighter or not.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are the benefits of it having like a higher range towards like $1.20?
So the higher the range,
Mhm.
the less the kind of price impact has. So like if price is fluctuating, you will automatically be rebalancing Blur and ETH because they need to be like in line with the pool. And so if you have a really tight range, any small movement in price on either side will widely fluctuate how much Blur or how much ETH you have. Versus, but like a tighter range means you're concentrating your liquidity, so you get more return. So it's a risk tolerance thing. Versus a wider range means number one, less price impact. Like, who cares if Blur moves 10 cents if your range is like, 20 cents to $2? You don't really care. It's not going to change that much for you. But if it moves 10 cents and your range is like 55 to 65 cents, you're kind of sweating, And yeah, so those are the two things. It's like tighter range is more leverage and more risk, but you're also getting a lot more back on the actual pool versus a wider range is safer and you won't be subject to as much price fluctuation.
I'm gonna play it safe because I don't know much about pools right now.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's a pretty reasonable range.
Yeah, depends how long you plan on like keeping it in the pool too, or like when you want to take it out. Right.
I mean, what's like average time that you guys spend on these pools?
It really depends on the asset. Could be anywhere. Could be 10 hours. Could be 7 days.
Yeah, I was thinking. I mean, no more than a week for this pool specifically. I'm just trying to get my feet wet. Maybe like 4 to 5 days. Apologize, my dog barking if you hear him.
Do you have to set the time frame when you set up the pool?
No, you get to close the pool whenever you want. Just know that it's a ETH transaction, so it has gas cost.
And
All
it's
right, so-
1-to-1. Like the amount of ETH I should pull should be the same amount in Blur.
If you're using V3, it'll choose for you based on your range, so you don't even have to think about that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to figure out how much to send to the pool. Can I calculate that before I set up the pool, or like I'm doing this?
You can calculate it before you click send on the pool.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, so that way I know exactly how much to have in the wallet when I.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Exactly.
Cool. So I set up new position. And I select the pair. I select ETH and Blur.
If you're comfortable with sharing your screen, I can walk you through it. If not, let's talk through it.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Poppy,
crap.
let Johnny go.
I don't know if this will work because let me see if this will work because I'm on a remote desktop to another machine. But let me see if this will work.
Sorry, what'd you say, Deathstrike?
Oh, if you want to let Johnny share, I don't know if you can, but anyway.
Oh yeah, am I done now? Like I just have to wait for the confirmation.
Confirmation, and then you can go to click the pool again, and then you can just look at all your open pools basically at that point.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you. Really appreciate taking the time.
No, of course.
Can you guys see my liquidity my Uniswap screen? Can you see my Uniswap screen?
I see your Discord. I see your Firefox. Cool. Yeah, I see it now. Yeah. So you want to select blur if you haven't added it already. Okay, it's there. Perfect. It says you do not have any. No, you have blurred. I'll actually scroll down a little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to send it to the wallet once this is like
You do have full sharing on, not just a single screen. So if you want to be a little more careful, up to you. Just letting you know.
That's fine. I got nothing to hide.
Okay, cool. I know people have different comfort levels with that stuff.
So what do I do now? To put like if I want to do, let's see, 3E, and then it tells me how much blur I have.
Yeah, you want to anchor it to your blur, not to your ETH, because that's just the easiest way to do it.
Okay.
So I would just hit max on blur or whatever, and then work.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to send some. Let me send some blur to this account.
Okay.
Give me a second.
Yeah, take your time.
Hey guys, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, what's up?
Hey, what's this 1% fee tier?
Yeah, so basically there's different types of pools that will give you a certain like of every trade, a certain amount will go to liquidity pool providers. Because Blur is considered a quote unquote exotic / riskier one, you're getting 1% into that whole liquidity pool. It's probably the best price you're gonna get on that. 1% is a lot.
Okay, so I want to keep it 1%, basically.
Yeah, for two reasons actually. One is it's a lot. Two is all the other pools just won't see as much actual demand, like the 0.3s and stuff. They're on an older version that isn't being traded on as much. You'll get a little bit of volume, but like you want to be where the volume is, and the 1% tier is where the volume is.
Okay, cool. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'm a bit late to the party, but can you can you explain the? Oh, you're probably going to explain it now with Johnny, actually.
Okay. So you guys can see my screen?
Yep. We're just walking through an example with Johnny. Ezra, feel free to ask any questions you might have.
Yeah, Ezra, all I did was send blur to this wallet. That's all really that's in it. There's a little ETH, but no, I got to get some more ETH in here at some point.
No worries.
So, okay, so I put max blur, right? And then I need 3 ETH, but now I guess the big question is this min price and max price, right?
Yeah. So the easiest way to think of it is like the min price is the highest price you would be comfortable with Blur being range in and the max price is the lowest price. It's really confusing. The easiest way for me to say it is like, if you set your min price at 1,500 Blur per ETH, that's like saying Blur's at $1. If you set your max price at like 3,000 Blur per ETH, that's like saying Blur's at 50 cents. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. But what is a that doesn't, I'm still not translating that. My risk tolerance would be pretty medium. I don't want high risk.
Yeah, so Blur is what, like 64 cents right now. It's whatever range you're comfortable with that you think the pool will fall into. To kind of call out like the wider the min max price range you have, the less of an impact like a 10-cent move might have, because it just means when price is shifting between ETH and Blur, it's just gonna sell your ETH for Blur or sell your Blur for ETH, and it'll like widely fluctuate if you have a really small range, less fluctuation if you have a wider range. The trade-off is the tighter the range you have, the more you're gaining on fees, because you're concentrating the liquidity you are providing in that range so that you're getting as much fees out of it as you can. So that's kind of the trade-off from a risk tolerance perspective. So if you're like a medium risk tolerance guy, then like, I don't know, let me know what you think is like pretty reasonable for the Blur token to fluctuate between like, I'd say something like 40 cents to $1 is probably pretty reasonable.
Oh, yeah, I would take that.
Yeah. So like, again, not financial advice, but like 40 cents to $1 would be like your min price there would be like around 1,500 Blur per ETH. And
Yeah,
then,
yeah.
And then your max price would be like, let me do the math. Like, what is it, like 4,000 ish or something like that, give or take. Did I do that
Cool.
No, I think you did the math wrong.
Thanks. Yeah, it's probably closer to like 5,000.
It's 3,700.
Okay, yeah, I mean, close enough.
And what happens if it shoots up?
So if by shoots up you mean Blur price going up?
Yeah. I'm not Blur. Yeah, like Blur price shooting up.
If Blur price goes up, what happens is you're now unbalanced in the liquidity pool. So the liquidity pool will automatically sell your Blur for ETH, so that you have ETH matching Blur, because the liquidity pool has to have equal like contributions for Blur and ETH. So it automatically controls what's happening. So basically what happens if Blur price goes up is you will be taking profits on Blur and selling it for ETH.
Gotcha.
You would have been better off probably by just holding the Blur at that point, but that's a different conversation, right? And that's the concept of impermanent loss.
And it's same vice versa if it dumps, right?
Yeah, same vice versa. If Blur dumps relative to ETH, because that's what you care about here, then it'll start what's it called? Buying a lot more Blur.
With my ETH, right? I can't lose more than I put in.
You can't lose more than you put in, and it'd be, unless you think either of these is going to zero, you wouldn't be losing much. It's just opportunity cost that you're losing.
You lose dollar value, not ETH or Blur value.
Yeah.
Okay, and what about the fee tier?
It's just pick 1%. We can get into the details of why, but like that's the only range. Well, first of all, it's the highest range. Second of all, it's where most people trade, and you need as much trading as possible to maximize the amount of like fees you're collecting. And yeah.
Okay, so next step, as soon as I get 2.67 or whatever, I'll just say 3 ETH into this account. I just click on this. This will change to a pool or whatever, and I'm done.
Yeah, and then you're done. And then you have a couple of options from there. You can collect your fees whenever you want, but it's a gas transaction. You can close your pool whenever you want. That'll also claim your fees. That's also a gas transaction, just so you know. Gas is not too bad right now, what 0.02, 0.03 maybe max, but just to want to call out that's part of the equation here. And then at the range you're putting, like you're a little bit later into the game, so don't expect like 10% off the bat. But like over the course of 24 hours, you might see like a couple of percent. You're just collecting interest.
I'm just kind of playing with it, so just get more. Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you got it, man.
So can you tell again what the impermanent loss was?
Yeah, so what happens is, let's say, I'll keep it really easy. Let's say you have like 50% Blur or 50% ETH in your pool. If Blur's price goes up, Blur is going to be unbalanced compared to ETH, right? Because now your Blur is worth more, right? That can't happen in a pool because a pool has to have equal liquidity. And so what the pool will automatically do, if Blur price goes up, it'll be selling Blur and buying ETH so that your liquidity pool stays, equivalent. Now, what you've basically done at that point is you've taken profit on Blur in ETH as the price of Blur is going up relative to ETH. And you're like, wait, that sounds great, right? Well, if you had just held onto your Blur and not put it in the pool, you could have just sold it for sold the top on Blur versus ETH now. So the difference is impermanent loss. Like, you're selling Blur for ETH as Blur goes up, which is great, but you could have just held onto the Blur and sold it for ETH. Does that make sense?
I'm still processing it.
Sorry, yeah, this is like something that's easier done on like a napkin and like explaining it. But basically, let's say Blur's at like 50 cents, right? Like if I just bought Blur at 50 cents and sold at $1, I would have 2x'd, right? That's great. If I put it in a liquidity pool and like, let's say ETH doesn't move and it's just like Blur goes from 50 to 100, I will be selling on the way up from 50 to 100, which is great because like, I've taken profit in ETH with Blur, but I could have just 2x'd if I just held on to the Blur separately. So generally speaking, you want price to stay stable and you're just collecting fees for lending, because your opportunity cost of like, you could have just put a bet on Blur and collected your 2x if you just didn't put a liquidity pool, that would have been better off if that's what your bet was. So this is just a tool to generate interest on an asset you own, with the bet that the price will stay relatively flat.
And is that why when you go higher max price, it requires more ETH because you need more ETH available to sell off? Am I getting that right?
So what happens with a higher max price is you're actually trying to cover more of the ocean. You're saying, hey, like I want to still collect fees even if this goes all the way up, all the way down, right? I guess in this case. And so by trying to cover more of the ocean, you need more money to cover that part of the ocean so that you're collecting fees on that range. Did that make any sense?
Yeah, I think so. So if I'm available to just monitor this for a little bit, I could just go really skinny on my ranges, get kind of maxed out.
Yeah. So
the APY.
Yeah, so going really skinny on your ranges gets you a lot more fees because you're basically leveraged, right? All your liquidity is concentrated on that particular range. You're hoping this to move out. Couple of things. One, if you're closely monitoring it and you're ready to like, shit, this is moving too quickly against me, I want to get out of the pool, you can do that. Two, if you don't care that all your Blur becomes ETH, that all your ETH becomes Blur, which is something Win was talking about earlier, that's another thing too. Like, you're like, well, fuck it. Like, I don't care if Blur goes to like 30 cents. I think it'll bounce back to 60 anyway. So even if I fall out of range, it'll come back later. And you truly believe in that, you could make that bet too. So that's another reason to go skinny if you're like, I'm sure this will do well either way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So you don't necessarily have to close your position when you go out of money. You can always wait for it to come back into money. But yeah.
And what kind of percentage fees are people seeing right now that are doing this?
It's certainly slowed down since the peak, but I will just give you an example. I have, wouldn't call it the tightest range of the world, but I've seen whatever. I've been here like an hour or so. I am getting 0.7% back on the last hour for the big pool that I just set up. Not the greatest thing in the world, not the end of the world either.
Yeah, I have set up two, like one with a wider range and one with a tight, just to have the comparison.
Yeah.
So I can do some calculations and then it's not bad.
Nice. All things considered, like, yeah, it's kind of just bouncing around that 60-cent range.
0.7%, is that like per hour, per day?
In the last hour, I have gotten 0.7%. That's a data point for you. I'm sure it'll slow down time, but honestly, that's not bad for an hour. An hour of not doing any work, but just putting my money in. To give you an idea of the first liquidity pool I put up, I put it up quite early, right around the token release. What was that like? Was it 3 hours, give or take? Maybe three and a half-ish ago. That has seen about 12%. But that's only because I caught a lot of the demand early before the pool got big, if that makes sense. 12% is awesome, that's for 3 hours, holy shit.
Sweet, I'm set up.
So if my
I'm
math is
calculating
right,
the two I have. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to give some numbers of what I have here. I have one that it's a wider range, and it's giving around 0.42 per hour or something like that.
Okay.
Percent. And the other one that it's more aggressive, it's 0.65 per hour, more or less. So yeah, it's very similar.
Yeah, that sounds about right. If your math is right, what were you gonna ask? Somebody else. Or not. But understand that more people are entering the pool and demand's gonna slow down, right? The amount of blur trading in the first hour is probably freaking ridiculous. So don't expect this extended time period. But I wouldn't be surprised if I saw 10% in the next 24 hours. And shit, pretty damn good, in my opinion. So
you'd make, what you're saying is you'd make 10% in 24 hours.
That is not financial advice, but
no, that's the potential.
I wouldn't be surprised if I saw that.
And that would be on the total amount pooled, ETH and Blur?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, cool.
I was saying in the first 2 hours of my first pool, that's already at 12%. But that's because it caught the early rush, right? So
yeah. No, I was just trying to roll some more profits from this stimmy, and I didn't know where to go with it.
Yeah.
So if I could make 10%, no, that's not guaranteed. That'd be pretty nice.
Yeah, certainly.
And that could go the longer you leave it in, assuming things don't dump or skyrocket, then you could make that again in another 24 hours, right?
Yeah, you could always restart your pool or something like that. Demand's gonna slow down. I think over the next 24, 48 hours, demand's gonna slow down, pool's gonna go up. So your numerator's going down, your denominator's going up, and that it's gonna be much slower accumulating fees. But I think a perfect example is if my stance is, look, I don't think Blur price is going to move that much. Personally, I don't think a lot of the supply is going to be moving around much in any direction for a while, and I'm happy to just hold my Blur. If Blur goes way up and I end up selling my Blur for ETH, I'm fine. If it stays around this range and I undo it at some point, and I think Blur is going to go up in the future, and I'm happy to make that bet, that's fine too. That's totally great, right? So. For my stance, I'm not worried too much about the Blur I have in now. This is not the pool is a short-term play for me, but the long-term strategy behind Blur might be a little longer term. I could care less what happens right now. I'm just collecting some
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of catching, right? Because maybe you don't know for sure what to do with the Blur. So then you at least put it to work.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah, you nailed it. You're putting it to work.
When you do a tight range and it costs you more, that's just because it's more focused and you're putting more on the line for that tight range within that price. You're not spreading it out as much.
Yeah, so the tightness that increases is where your min price of Blur versus ETH moves tighter. That is going to cause the highest ETH change. And that's just because you're really riding the line on how quickly ETH Blur trade-offs need to be done to keep the liquidity pool tight. And so that's why the price would go way up in that direction.
I don't know if someone's asked this before. How does it choose whether you got Blur or ETH as the fee? If someone's buying or selling, right?
How does it choose what your one more time?
So you know how your unclaimed fees, how does it choose what to give you between Blur and ETH?
It gives you both. Any trade always involves the two assets, right? You selling one, buying the other. So because of the rebalancing that happens, like the pool has to stay balanced no matter what. You're collecting fees off any transaction that moves the rebalancing the pool in either direction. You're always going to get both.
I made 50 cents already. Let's go.
Let's go.
Yeah, this is cool.
You gotta get the gas fees back first.
There is one really bad scenario that you don't want, which is both your assets go into zero, but you probably have big problems anyway if that's happening. So just to call that out.
Wait, but even if one of the assets go to zero, you're in trouble, right? If you were converted into that one.
Well,
It depends on which way you go.
If one of your assets goes to zero, then you will have 100% of your pool in that asset.
Yeah, so you're fucked.
You don't want
that.
So you need just one of them to be zero to be screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 isn't great either because then, but again, like, I think you have bigger problems if ETH is at zero, for all of us. So.
So as long as it stays in the range, I'm fine, correct?
As long as it stays in the range, you're collecting fees.
Yeah, okay.
You can still be like, I've had pools go out of range and then come back in range, so it stops collecting fees and then collects fees again. Like, that's totally a thing.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I have a question.
So
for okay, so I'm looking at my pool right now, and it says it'll show like how much liquidity I have available within the pool.
Yep.
Do I have to continually keep adding ETH to it or no?
No. It will automatically rebalance for you to make sure it is in line with the pool. For
Okay.
good.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
How can you tell what percentage of you're getting? Like,
yeah,
you said 10% you were getting over the last hour, or 12%, whatever it was. How? Oh, you have to do the math. There's nothing on the dashboard that shows you.
No.
On Dex Tools, it tells you the total liquidity in the pool.
Yeah, that's a slightly different question. That's how much are you of the entire pool, and so how much you're getting, and then the demand is how much is being traded on top of that. So different numerator and denominator. But for yourself, like, I'm just dividing unclaimed fees by liquidity.
So let's say, Asia wakes up and claims all their Blur and puts it all into LP, just hypothetical, right?
It could be.
I'm assuming that would reduce the rewards that go to my pool.
Yeah, because the ocean is now larger and you are a smaller part of the ocean.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, that's cool. I get it. I mean, 10% in a day would be cool. That's insane. Where else can you get that? I know you're not saying that. I know you're not saying that. I get it.
So far, it's fine. Volume has definitely dried up because the insanity that was the first hour or so is just not going to be matched. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
I'm the only loser on Blur. I've lost $1,200.
How did you lose money on Blur?
Because my token drop was 1,200.
But how'd you?
Yeah, like still, how did you lose?
My pool
Fees?
was my pool was doo-doo daka. Doo-doo kaka.
How? That still doesn't add up. Like, how did you?
I ended up with all Blur.
You set a really tight range and then.
Yeah, it hasn't touched that since.
Did you set it at the top? Did you set it at like 73 cents or something?
I thought I set it lower than I did. I did math wrong. I was trying to do 60 to 70 cents. I did like 65 cents to 72 cents.
I see. Well.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? If you were planning to hold anyway, for example, right? Then it's okay anyway, right? I don't know if you were planning to hold or not.
Yes, so you're not at 0 because even at 100% blur, you still have like 62.
Got all your blur.
Yeah, you still have your blur.
Yeah, I said I lost $1,200.
Why?
But you didn't lose $1,200 if you're
Because I had to buy the blur. My airdrop was 1,200 blur total.
Yes.
I'm still down money from when I started today.
But I mean, you bought at like what, 65 cents?
I have no idea.
Like blur hasn't dropped enough for you to have lost that much money, unless you bought like $30,000 worth of blur, which I don't think you did, right?
Nope.
Oh yeah, you're fine. You maybe lost like a couple $100 max.
Nope. I lost that. I lost $1,200. I'm telling you how much I lost because I see how much I lost.
You've only lost if you sell it, right?
It's
I mean, yeah.
Sorry. I was saying, no, as blur fluctuates, wouldn't it sell off back into your Ethereum? So you'd lose the blur, but you'd gain it back in Ethereum. I think if I'm hearing that correctly.
Correct.
Yeah. That's just like taking profits on the way up, basically. It's like the same thing.
I mean, do you think it's better if Blur, let's pretend I went on vacation and didn't look at this for a week and Blur skyrocketed? Would it be, in your opinion, would it be better than Blur dumping, or it really doesn't matter?
Well, all else equal, you would take up in price over down, because all of that happens there is that means you'll be 100% ETH and you took profits on blur.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's like, oh no,
Yeah.
I lost some permanent loss, but like my asset ultimately went up. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Down is never a good thing, because down means you're going to be 100% buying into blur as it's going down. So
Yeah. Yep. Yep. I get it.
So
I mean,
Deathstrike,
what's up?
my bad. Real quick, just was curious, when we want to take out, like when we want to close out the pool, do we just remove the liquidity and then collect the fees?
When you remove liquidity, it'll automatically collect your fees.
Okay.
It's one transaction.
So that would basically just close our
Close
it entirely. And you were saying that it's better to just close out the pool entirety than to constantly collect fees because of gas fees, correct?
Yeah, if you want, you can if you want, but like I personally almost always like close a pool and collect the fees, because if I really wanted to like re-implement, like why do you collect fees? So you can get it and then you can either redo a pool or something. Like I would just set up a new pool at that point personally. So on top of the gas. So yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, there are reasons. If you freaking crushed it on fees and you're sitting at like 30% in that pool and you want to set up another pool with the 30%, then by all means go ahead and collect the fees. But you know, at smaller amounts, that gas is going to kill you over time.
So I have I'm gonna go buy some blur, and I just installed this Eden RPC.
Yeah.
What slippage should I use?
It's pretty low fluctuation now, so I'd say even 2% slippage is fine. You don't want to overdo on a slippage, but yeah, you do lose gas on fails. Although gas is not bad now either. So I think 2% is fine. 5% if you want to be safe. Yeah.
And then you can also buy it on a centralized exchange too, right? And then you don't have to worry about slippage.
Some of them. You can't trade on certain ones. And also, if you're US based, you can't make trades on certain websites for it right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Do what you will with that information.
So does this vary? Like if I do the math right now, like, you know, I could say, okay, in the last 10 minutes, I've made X amount of dollars, right? And unclaimed fees. Do the math, times that by 10 minutes, you know, every 6 would be 1 hour, so times that by 6, and then times that by 24, it still doesn't come out remotely close to 10%. Does it fluctuate? Is that why?
It's gonna fluctuate. I don't think it's gonna be 10%.
Okay.
It's just like, you know, there could be a news pop and then trading goes rampant, right? Like, you just don't know. Yeah, the 10% was just like a random number I threw out.
Yeah. I get it. Yeah. I'm just, I mean, theoretically, it's going to go down to 2%, right?
Yeah. And that number you called out is kind of tough because, like, look, at the end of the day, it's gonna slow down. You just don't know how much, and it'll just depend on how that plays.
I mean, if it comes to a crawling halt because everybody's adding to the LP, then might as well just do something else with it.
You're less worried about the LP. You're more worried about trading volume just going way down. And one of the things working against you here is as centralized exchanges open up, the trading will go there away from Uniswap. And so, you know, if trading is not done on Uniswap, you're not providing liquidity and you're not collecting fees.
Gotcha.
You know, if everybody decides to trade on KuCoin or some shit like that.
Now I understand why you wouldn't want to keep it in here for like a month. You know.
Yeah. Some people do. You can do all sorts of weird shit. You could do USDC, USDT pool, for example. You know.
That's crazy. That's like so stable.
Yeah, so, you know, you can do incredible things with leverage and put a stupid amount of money. Like, there are always wild things you can do.
And that's where I hear people getting wrecked, though, that don't know what they're doing.
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess a stable way to do this would be to just do pools with Ethereum, right? For example, if you think that Ethereum is.
Yes, so that's an excellent way to do it. But at the same time, like, so many people do that you will be a drop in the bucket, so you won't be getting that much return. But that is definitely an option.
Right. But it's like a safe, like staking, right? Literally.
Yeah.
Do you get a notification or any type of thing if it does go out of your range and they have to start selling assets?
No.
To buy the other asset? No. Okay.
So the selling buying doesn't happen when you go out of range. It's already happening. It's always.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay, cool. Well, it's a good learning exercise.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Maybe I'll hang here for another 10 minutes. I have to go to a meeting after this, but see if anybody has any last questions or anything for the next 10 minutes. But call that out. I'll let somebody else wants to take over. All right, cool. Just hang tight for the next 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Deathstrike. I appreciate it.
Of course. Just want to make sure we'll get educated and mostly don't get wrecked. So everything in our power to make sure we can make that happen. Treat this as just another tool in your toolkit when it comes to thinking about the best way to use your liquidity. So.
Yeah, last question I'll leave you with, and appreciate all the help. What's a semi-aggressive range?
What's a semi-aggressive range? That is hard to say. It comes down to what price fluctuation you think. So, like, you know, I think within anything it's already traded is a super aggressive range, right? So if you did like 55 to 65 cents, that's all hyper aggressive. Within 50 to 70 cents, yeah, pretty aggressive. Anything beyond that, maybe a little less aggressive. But it just comes down to what you think the price fluctuations are going to be.
So can you just give me like a min price, max price? I'm at like 1,500, maybe max price at like 35.
Yeah, I wouldn't call that super aggressive. That's like pretty reasonable. That's just saying it's going to be within 46 cents to $1. Not unreasonable.
Okay.